The traditional American funeral ritual is dead. Cremation dominates disposition now. But what does that mean in terms of how our values have changed and what we actually believe in regarding cremation? If we look back at the late 19th century, we can observe how Americans did not want to embrace cremation. It was extremely unpopular for decades. The church thought it was a triumph of materialism over spirituality. There were concerns about murderers, specifically poisoners, getting away with their crimes. And there was also a concern about family members being traumatized by their loved ones being cremated. Here we are in a 19th century cemetery in Lambertville, New Jersey. And this cemetery demonstrates how at one time in the 19th century, people were moving away from burial in the churchyard. That was their way of taking control away from the clergy, and based on their spirituality and how much money they had, they could bury in a way that they wanted to. Cremation is the same now. People are changing their preferred disposition because they have more control over it. So I'm curious about what the rising cremation rate means in terms of belief systems, but I'm also curious about what it means for the funeral profession. The funeral profession is pretty reliant on casketed burial as its source of revenue. So can it survive all of these cremations? So I originally became interested in cremation because I was working here in October of 2023, and the prison throws a Halloween party where all of the cell blocks are turned into these themed haunts. And during the event, a guest tried to scatter the cremated remains of his parents inside one of the haunts, inside one of the cell blocks. And he did this because his parents had come to the event every year. It's a really big party in Philadelphia. People love it. And he thought that that would be a fitting tribute to them. And so when that happened, people were really upset. Employees thought it was really disrespectful. And the guy who did it was asked to leave. But it just got me thinking about what the culture of scattering is about, why we are allowed to scatter in certain places and not in others, and just about how people perceive cremated remains. Why are they gross? Why are they disrespectful? So that was really the beginning of this journey. Since that night at Eastern State, I started looking into cremation. I wanted to know how long we've been practicing cremation in the United States, when it actually became popular, and what kinds of belief systems are associated with cremation. So when I worked at Eastern State Penitentiary, people always asked me, is this place haunted? And the easiest way to deflect and respond to that was to say, not as haunted as the Rite Aid down the street, which is this Rite Aid right here. And the reason I would say that is because this Rite Aid is actually built on the same land that a 18th century potter's field was built on. Potter's fields were burial grounds for people who couldn't afford to be buried or whose remains were unidentified. That graveyard would have been right here. And something really interesting about Potter's Fields in Philadelphia is that people would be buried for 1 year and 1 day before then being exhumed, and their remains would then be cremated. That is an example of 18th, 19th century association between cremation and poverty. So far in my research, I've had the chance to interview the president of CANA, which is the Cremation Association of North America, Robert Hunsaker, the executive director of CANA, Barbara Kemmis. I've gotten to interview a lot of funeral directors that I met at the ICCFA convention, including some who have been in the profession for over 30 years. I've also gotten to interview the president of the Cincinnati Mortuary School, Jack Leichner, who taught me all about how the profession is changing and how he's trying to prepare the next regime of funeral directors. And I've gotten to speak with people who are thinking about the way rituals are changing, such as Jennifer Muldowney, who goes by the Glam Reaper and is an end-of-life celebrant. So what next? Shall we go to Atlantic City to the New Jersey Funeral Directors Conference?